Hi, everyone. Hello, welcome
Hello.
back to another episode of VCTV, which is a venture capital TV, and it's from LaToken. So we are back here on another week of VCTV, and today we're going to discuss about food security. So yeah, for this month of May, we have come up with new topics to discuss, and we have speakers who are going to share their insights. So stay tuned as we start a week on discussing about food security. So welcome back, all of you, Kingsley, Amit, and Gary. I'm very excited to host you again, to hear all this fantastic stuff about food security and all the issues, challenges, pros and cons, everything around that. So before I introduce my speakers, let me just introduce myself. My name is Sunny Mohanty. I represent LaToken Exchange and I moderate VCTV, and I just love it. Okay, great. All set. I'm going to start with a quick round of intro of the speakers of today's session. I'm going to start with Kingsley. Hi, Kingsley. Welcome back. How are you?
Hello, Sonny. How are you? It's a pleasure to be back here. It's family hour again. We call this family hour now, not just LaToken VCTV. It's family hour again, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see Gary, everybody here today to discuss food security, which is an important subject. My name is Kingsley Kobayashi. I don't think I need to introduce myself anymore on LaToken, but my name is Kingsley Kobayashi. I'm a serial entrepreneur, tolerant expert. Done different startups. I invest in commercial real estate, blockchain projects, traditional industry, renewable energy, and a lot more. Agriculture, just name it. So if the project is good, it's result oriented or impacting in the society, I am willing to invest in it and collaborate with anybody that is doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kingsley, and welcome back. Amit, next we have Amit Grover.
Hi, Fonny, and it's nice to be back again. It's my second session with you, Fonny. So a quick introduction about myself. So I, hail from New Zealand. I've had a long career in CPG and the brand marketing space in some of the largest companies in the world, followed by my own venture. So I've been running a management consulting practice for the last 14 years that I started in New Zealand and built into Australia, the UAE, and the UK and Singapore. Currently, I've been involved and engaged in building a venture capital fund, a $50 million early stage venture cap fund that addresses in areas of alternative proteins and alternative dairy. So that's kind of a quick overview. And today's topic is of especially a lot of interest to me because we cross a lot of areas that we're involved in with our fund. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Next, I have Gary. Morning, Gary. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. The roosters aren't crowing down here today. It's really good. So it's great. I'm still down in Key West, Florida. So good to see some friendly faces, some friends. My name's Gary Fowler. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. I've done 17 companies, an IPO on NASDAQ, and 2 unicorns, Click Software and Eva.ai, which I co-founded. I love artificial intelligence and quantum. We're at GSD, Get Shit Done Venture Studios. We curate quantum and AI companies from around the world, helping them go global. We particularly are focusing on Africa, do a lot of work in Nigeria, now Kenya, Ghana, Zambia, and South Africa. Actually, I'm one quarter, my grandmother is from North Africa. She's Egyptian, Greek Egyptian. So I grew up as a kid, and she was speaking Arabic and Greek, and I thought it was normal. And my grandfather would speak Greek back to her. He was Greek, but anyhow, so love being here and look forward to this panel. And as we know, food security, as we've gone down through, food and toilet paper over the last year have been critically important to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary, for adding a little humor. I mean, it's very much essential to have that. Thank you, and makes the Monday as well a little stressful. Great. We set with introductions. Again, as everybody highlighted, food security, supply chain is very critical. And again, with countries going down on lockdowns, with India being the heart of the news, we don't know which other country might just be crippled under the pandemic. We don't know, so we have to be ready for that. So the agricultural value chain, all that happens from farm to fork, is complex, and its ability to put food on our tables can be affected by the pandemic, as we know, in countless ways. The mobility of farm hands may be hampered by lockdowns. Obviously, we have seen that it has already hampered by the lockdowns. The equipment needed by agricultural workers, like the pesticide mask, may be in short supply. The need to redirect produce can create scarcities or overstocks. So as markets adjust to those, specific populations may be at a greater risk than others. So let's discuss some of the trends, covering different parts of the world, global insights, and what can be done to, prevent or help the community in such a pandemic when it comes to food security. So let's start with Amit.
Sure.
Amit, what is food security? What is, first of all, let's just define for those who may not know what is food security. What is food security and why is it important?
Yeah, so I think food security came into much light with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's one of those 17 SDGs that United Nations talks about. And I think one of the real reasons why this is important is to look at the sustainability of the planet. So, when you understand food security, there you've got to divide that in parts. One is the fact of availability of essential food products to countries and to communities that are underprivileged and undernourished. So that's a huge mandate of the United Nations to kind of secure consumers in the world with the adequate food and nutrition and well-being, on one aspect. On the other aspect, food security leads to, much talked about issues of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, and to kind of produce food sustainably that goes a long way in protecting the planet and as well as protecting nutrition among us, is the second mandate. And the way I look at it, Sonny, is you have to look at this from a developed world perspective as well as an emerging market perspective, because food security for both these are quite extreme. In the developed world, it's much about nutrition, it's much about well-being, it's much about areas of technology, areas of supply chain, like you just said, areas of farm to table. In the emerging market spaces, it is about kind of making food available in the right nutrition and in the right kind of environment. Now, one of the biggest problems that we are facing in the world, and I have these debates quite often, is in the emerging market spaces. Let's talk about India and China. The amount of agricultural land that is going into industrial and residential and real estate development. I mean, there's a lot of land getting used to to fuel the growing middle class population, with real estate development, and agriculture is losing its kind of value. So those are issues that are happening in the emerging market spaces, and they're kind of, going to a perspective where an aggregated economy like India needs to import food products and food grain, which is absolutely abysmal because, the kind of country we have, we should be able to feed our own people. So I think there are different aspects of food security, but essentially what food security means is sustainability in terms of food and nutrition, and obviously making food available to those communities that need it the most.
Thank you so much for explaining with examples from India as well, Amit. Great start. Thank you. Kingsley, over to you, please. Kingsley, you're on mute.
Yeah, Sonny, it's good. It's good to be back here again, and it's a major problem, and it's not just for developed country. When we talk about food security, we talk about access to food, to nutritional food that would make you to be, a better person, not just any food. But when it comes to some developing countries, you don't have a choice. You only have a choice when you have enough food. So when it comes to food, you are bound to eat what you have if it's available.
Yes.
Some people don't have they don't have access to that food. So until we have enough production in the world to be able to feed everyone safely, sufficiently, and nutritiously, we have failed the world. So when we talk of food, you look at probably developing countries are suffering more. This is not true. Developing countries like, for example, Nigeria, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of good farmland. You still have a family system that we share their food with you, unlike developed countries where you are on your own. You know, for example, in Japan, I was just discussing with my wife today, and she said there are people that still school children that still have 1 square meal a day because they only eat at school, and when they go back home, there's no food. It's a developed country, but this problem is there. People don't have access. With this corona pandemic, the family system has long been broken for those who migrated to the urban area. So when you migrate to the urban area, you cut yourself away from the grassroots. So there's no food being sent to you. Yeah. Unlike if I'm hungry in Lagos, I will ask my mommy or my sister or anybody, send me food. They will send me food, right? But here, there is nobody that will send you food. So, but at the same time, you have countries in Africa that have no food at all. You have countries in Southeast Asia that have no food at all. You have countries in South America that have no food at all. For these people, they have no choice. They will eat whatever you put in front of them. So nutrition does not come into question. It's what can I have to eat right now? So defining food security is a wide range, depends on region to region. But according to UN, it's giving food to everybody in a safe and nutritious way, which is, I believe, is still a long way to go. We are not there yet. I am very happy that there's a lot of startup, a lot of data being used, a lot of AI being used, as Gary will always say, to analyze what is going on in these different regions and how we can help to impact on those regions to make that better. I think that this is our goal, the goal of our generation, to make sure that there is no hunger in the next generation to come. So I'm looking forward to really discussing this and hitting on some points, what we can do to make it better for everyone. Thank you, Sonny.
Absolutely. Very good points, Kingsley. Better world for all of us. No hunger, zero hunger. Thank you so much. Gary, over to you, please, now.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we don't understand the scope of the problem. There are 800 million people across the world today that go to bed hungry every night. And, you know, it is a rural problem because most of them are small shareholder farms that are entirely dependent on agriculture. And it's a challenge. And, you know, with the pandemic, the people that have been food insecure previously are the ones that have been most effective. It's kind of interesting because, you know, nearly 75% of the poor people in developing countries live in rural areas. And if we look at it, those small farmers that are out there many times are headed by females. So we have a challenge. We have a challenge that our population is going to go from 8 billion to 13 billion by the end of the century. But what does that really mean for food security? It means that, think about it, by 2050, there'll be 9 billion people on the planet Earth. And in order to feed us that expected growth to 9 billion, the world will have to double the current food production in order to be able. It's not a linear problem. And think about it, with global warming, scarcity of natural resources, the world will have to be entirely more efficient than we've ever been before. That's where technologies like artificial intelligence, that's where technologies like quantum computers are going to really come in. And, you know, we laugh about this toilet paper shortage, but that just really, and the pork shortage and the vegetable challenges. I mean, right here in the U.S., during the pandemic, it was so bad because restaurants had been shut down that the farmers had such an abundance of food, they were throwing it away. They had food banks where normal people were coming down to pick up food because you could not get it any other place, right? They had shut down. The retailers had shut down, et cetera. So we've been down through it. The beauty and the opportunity is with all the efficiencies we're going to be able to develop with artificial intelligence, we're farming 4.0. We have an opportunity to make our own little dent in the universe and really democratize the opportunity for food production.
Thank you, Gary, for highlighting those points and again talking about supply chain, because it's very important and it's related to food security. So what are the factors that affect the food supply chain and how it affects our collective food security? Let's just focus a little bit, put our focus on the supply chain side of the food chain as well. So let's start with Amit.
Yes, so I think, when we talk about supply chain, I think, again, you got to see it in context of different parts of the world and different kind of systems. So if you're looking at, for example, the Western ecosystem, which is, much like, the Central Europe and United Kingdom and developed parts of America and Canada, what we've seen in the pandemic is, the supply chains have been actually quite pivoting digitally in terms of e-commerce. And that's really helped get the bread on the table, while the lockdowns were going on, while customers didn't go into supermarkets. But on a wider, going off the pandemic, yes, I mean, if you look at supply chain is a very, very important aspect, from warehousing to logistics to getting the product to the end customer and all the different distribution points in between, from the wholesaler to the retailer to even e-commerce. And that ecosystem is obviously fairly very developed in some of the countries that I just named. Whereas if you look at, let's take the emerging market space, a country like India, with abundance of food crop supply, yet a large portion of that goes to waste and they have to throw it away because of lack of warehousing, lack of roads, lack of infrastructure, lack of cold storage to really get to the end consumer. And on top of that, lack of organized retail. So I personally believe that there's a lot of brick and mortar work needed in the emerging market spaces to be able to build a network or a supply chain, starting from the farmer to the warehousing, to the cold storages, right down to the distribution, and finally the retail vends that needs to kind of develop in a way to get the product down to the end consumer, where the Western economies are kind of facing other sorts of problem that network already exists. Now, how do we even make it more efficient? And that's where I think e-commerce and the digital ecosystem is playing a huge role. And we've seen that in the pandemic, how many of these grocery delivery apps and all that and farm to table platforms have kind of really come about.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting Western and developing economies, because I want to talk about domestic and global angles of food supply chain. Thanks for adding that on. Kingsley, over to you, please.
Yeah, Sonny, thank you very much. When we talk of supply chain, I think the Western world already have that sorted out. Countries like Japan, countries like America, countries like Canada don't have a problem with that because they already have the storage facility. They have good roads to transport it. They have power to make sure if it's fish or cold product, they are well taken care of. But when you go to emerging markets, when you go to developing countries, like Ami said, you have bad roads. You have flooded roads. You have on the road that is supposed to get to the market in a day, but will not get there in 3 days due to bad roads, due to bad weather, due to the vehicle broke down on the way. And then when it gets to its destination, there is no storage facility. Right. Now, even where they have storage facility, there is no power to power the storage facility. You don't have light, you don't have electricity. So how do you make this work? So the problem with developing countries is that it's not that they don't have food, they have the food. It's how to take the food from point A to point B, or from point B to point C. This is the major problem. And once it gets there, how do they store the food? Take, for example, plantain, yam, fish is done, like even take onions, for example, onions. Onions is made in northern Nigeria. To transport it from northern Nigeria to the south or the west, take about 2 days. If the vehicle was to break down, you already have a problem because it's just parked in an open truck. So you also think of what is affecting the food. Is the food still good by the time it gets to its destination? So those are the rural areas. Yes, they get the food fresh, they eat fresh, they are fresh. But getting to where it's going to go becomes a problem. Then you come to countries like Japan, where you have a system that works already. They have everything in place. Then you have food wastage.
Yeah.
Where people don't have enough food, then you have food wastage. Because you have all these big department stores. By the end of the day, the food is expired that they make if you don't buy it. What do they do with this food? They throw it away. The food cannot be recycled. Why is this food not given to those who cannot afford to eat? For example, an 83-year-old woman was arrested here for changing the, what do you call it, the price tag of a $3 food to $1.50 food. This is hunger. This woman is hungry. This woman should not be arrested. In fact, if that was my manager, I would fire the manager. This woman should be given free food for 1 year. You see, these are areas that humans are no longer human. The art of giving has become something that is very rare. You know, like somebody actually wrote on LinkedIn, I am not scared of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is getting up there. Common sense. People don't have common sense anymore. People don't have, self-intelligence anymore. Intelligence will tell you, your discretion will tell you that this old lady needs food. This old lady is hungry. In a developing country or a country where there is hunger, you actually know what it means to be hungry, so you are willing to give. In a system that is already rigged, fixed, that everybody thinks that everybody has, it becomes a problem because they don't know how to give. They don't know how to share what they have. They don't know how to share the food they have. They don't know how to make decisions to make others happy. It's all about me, 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 me. You want to prove something. You arrest an 80-year-old woman for stealing 150 cents food. Hello, this is hunger. So we have different problems in different areas. So when you look at areas where, there's a reason. For example, there are homeless in Japan. A homeless person will never go to a Japanese person. They will never approach a Japanese person. Because they know they are not getting...
A homeless?
In Japan, a homeless person,
a
homeless person will not go to a Japanese person. They would rather go to a foreigner. Because they know the foreigner will give. Because we know what it means to be hungry back where we are coming from. And when you understand what is hunger, when you have slept without food for 2-3 days, I have done that. And you know what it means to somebody. You know what it means to share the little you have. This is the empathy that we humans need to have back. The art of sharing. There's a system, even in the animal kingdom, or in the zoo, or call it wherever, or in the safari, where the lions and the tigers, they kill the animal. The other lesser priests will come in and eat from the food of the vulture, up to the ants. It's a system that has been created by nature. But we are trying to beat nature by not sharing. Yes, we have all the system in place, we have all the artificial intelligence, we have all the data, but if we don't share the knowledge, if we don't share the food we have a world problem. It is not that we don't have sufficient food in the world. There is sufficient food right now, but it's not being shared adequately among everyone. In your share, there's a share for somebody else. Until you realize that, we are not going anywhere. And yes, the population is going to grow to 30 billion, like Gary rightly said. When it gets to 30 billion, there's already artificial intelligence, data analysis in place to make sure that the world have sufficient food. That is why we have all these technologies coming up. But we should also think, how do we share this food? How does this food get to everybody? To the poorest man on the street, to the person that we think have and doesn't have. A lot of people go hungry in developing countries. They cannot tell you. We have nobody to talk to. But if you go to my village and you have no food, hey, are you going to kill yourself? I'll give you food. Those who have onions will give you onions. Those who have yam will give you yam. Those who have potato will give you potato. At the end of the day, you have at least 1 square meal a day. Unlike developed countries where you don't know anybody, you don't know your next door neighbor. You've not talked for 1 year or 2 years. So how are you going to ask him for food? It's not going to happen. That is what urbanization is causing to the food industry.
Right. I mean, great points, Kingsley. And also, that was very unkind to just arrest that woman for a 50 cents, changing sticker, like a price tag. Very unkind.
That means she was really hungry, right? Your mind will tell you this woman was really hungry, but for them, it's I gotta prove I'm the boss. I'm doing my job. No, you're not doing your job. You're the human.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing, Kingsley, different aspects about how can food be accessible to all of us, irrespective of where we are, which country, which region. Food should be accessible to everyone, right? Everybody's birthright. Thank you so much. Gary, your points, please. We're talking about the supply chain aspect of food. Gary, you're on mute.
Yeah, Kingsley's right on target. The one thing that had been true for a long time is that the supply chain was pretty stable with food, but what became readily apparent during the pandemic were some of the views that we had, like just-in-time inventory, and then more importantly, the insight into the supply chain. We had ships out at sea that couldn't get into port because of the pandemic, and we couldn't tell exactly where those ships were. So we really need, from the time of production, from the time of cultivating to the point that's in the retailer, so we can make those changements and adjustments. And having the artificial intelligence and quantum computers now coming on board will be able to give us that kind of insight that we need to make those critical decisions. Like I said, it's my dryer.
Oh.
Yeah,
the house is on fire. Sorry.
No. It may go off again, so I'm going to have to go shut it off. It's got a really loud buzzer. I'm down at the vacation place. Anyhow, so it was a real challenge, and we got to go down through and we understand that we've got some weaknesses in the system, and we got to really course correct. What does that mean? We've got to use artificial intelligence. So we have dashboards with insight, and more importantly, that we can make those kind of course corrections. So if we can't get into one place, we can get into another. I mean, even like as we speak today, with the pandemic as serious and such a critical situation as it is in India, I mean, you see where it's still, we have lots and lots of challenges with the supply chain. And Kingsley's right, with the democratization opportunity is how can we feed everybody? Like I said, there are 800 million people today that don't have enough food and to be able to really survive and live the right way. We need to figure out how to be more efficient with the production, but more importantly, to understand where we are in the supply chain to make those changes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And supply chain is a very important aspect of supplying food to everyone. Thank you so much. Again, with the pandemic and the climate change, we cannot ignore climate change impact on food security. So what are all environmental and climate impacts when it comes to food security? So, Amit, over to you with this question, environmental and climate impacts.
Sure. I think one of the big, impacts that we've seen in the recent days is greenhouse gas emissions. Now, obviously, when you talk about agriculture and livestock farming, that contributes a lot of methane gas that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. So that's been a huge challenge for, I think, a lot of the developed part of the world, not so much for emerging economies really, because they look at kind of climate change from a different perspective, but especially the developed part of the world has been quite serious toward it, Sonny, and I think there's much work getting done. So for example, my fund is obviously all about alternative food. So when I mean alternative food, is trying to find an alternative of meat. and trying to find an alternative of dairy so that your dependence on animal, so that two things that happens when you depend on animal. Number one, the farmland that is used, there's more farmland getting used for livestock breeding than actually for agricultural produce. On the other hand, there's more farmland getting used to produce soya that you kind of need to feed the livestock because they need to eat than, basically growing essential crops. So in a nutshell, what's happening is the research says over 50 to 60% of agricultural land is used for livestock. And that's kind of creating huge biodiversity issues, huge biosecurity issues. It's causing deforestation because you're kind of growing more soy to feed these livestock. So what my fund does, and this is an area we address very well, where we are trying to look at alternative to dairy and alternative to the quintessential animal protein that reduces that dependence and obviously uses cutting-edge technology to be able to produce some of that food, hence taking the dependence of the land to a certain extent. Don't get me wrong, the essential crops still have to come from the land for it to get processed and manufactured. But the dependence on the land to a great extent is reduced, and as a result, you reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So that's one of the biggest challenges people have with food security, that, how do you get greenhouse gas emissions to the lowest level possible?
That's a great point. I mean, it's very shocking to know 50% of agricultural farmlands are used for livestock farming.
I think personally, that's just an established research. Personally, I think it'll be more like 70%.
Wow.
Yeah, not kidding you. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Amit, for answering that so nicely. Kingsley, over to you again. Environmental and climate impacts on food security.
Yeah, well, we are trying to save the earth, and at the same time trying to feed the people that live in it. So it's two sides of the coin, and it's when you look at most developing country or even the Amazon, there's still bush burning. Bush burning causes a lot of problem. We kill all the animals, we kill their children, we kill everything. When you also look at fisheries in some areas, they use big nets and just drag everything, both the eggs, the babies, and everything. So there has to be a system put in place that should allow the younger generation of these animals to live. There has to be a system put in place to protect the Amazon, to protect the vegetation in developing countries. Now, as we advance into the Western world, we already have a lot of greenhouse farmers, a lot of farming are happening in buildings and things like that, which is very encouraging. But when you go to places like East Africa, you have drought, you have famine, you have you go to India, Sri Lanka, that area, you have flooding that will come and just destroy all their food crops that they have used 1 year to work for. And that is where you have the climate impact, because of the global warming and everything. We are destroying the planet ourselves. And then you also have farmers who are giving pesticides that are not safe.
Yeah.
Understand? They are not safe, but they don't understand it. All they want to do is get rid of the locust or the insects in their food, but at the same time, they are poisoning themselves and poisoning the world without knowing it. So we have to be very careful. What kind of pesticides or fertilizers do we put out there? Are they organic? Are they free? Are they friendly to the world, to the earth, to the people having it? Is it going to give them cancer? Is it going to save them? We have seen a lot of situations where the reverse was the case, where they were giving pesticides that will actually harm their body. They were giving fertilizers that will actually harm their body. I know a lot of research and a lot of work is being done in this area, but we still have to do more work. We still have to stop burning bushes. We still have to stop fishing in a way that will actually wipe up everything. Hunting, for example, and I know people hunt for fun, but Hello, excuse me. We're in the 21st century. We should stop killing tigers and killing lions and killing elephants. This is not a sport for me, in my own opinion. I'm sorry. People enjoy it. I grew up in it. But one thing we don't understand is that animals do not kill because they want to preserve. Animals kill to eat. And once they are full, they will not kill again. But humans, we are always thinking of how do we keep for next year? This is a problem. How do we kill to make ourselves happy? When does killing make you happy? So, I mean, there are things we need to put right as human beings to
Yeah.
save the world. There are things we need to put in place. So we need regulations. Regulations have to be put in place. The first time I went to Europe with my wife. I went to Czech Republic and White Ball. I said, okay, this is not a hunting season because the animals are producing,
Yeah.
which means there are pregnant animals, you cannot kill them. There are baby animals, you cannot kill them. So they know this period. So these kind of regulations need to be spread to other countries. Like you come to Japan, you have bears coming to attack people. Why? Because they don't know how to drop food for them in the mountains. If you drop enough food for them in the mountains, they will not come outside. These are things that common sense will teach us. We don't need rocket science to do this. These are simple things that we humans can do to help ourselves. So I think to start with awareness, education on how to make it better. Then regulations on pesticides, fertilizers, on bush burning, on fisheries and things like that. Then we'll be able to save the planet at the same time, give food to the people in a good way, nutritious food.
Absolutely. Very good points. And Czech Republic, that's where Blanca is from. Thank you so much for sharing things like with us. Gary, over to you, Gary.
Yeah. Go ahead. Can you state the question again? I was enthralled with what Kingsley was saying. So
it's about, we're talking about the impact of environmental and climate on food
yeah,
security.
sure. Well, I mean, so the challenges we've got, unprecedented changes that have taken place. The last 20 years, the temperature on the planet has gone up more than it did in the previous 100 years. Then we look at things like how it's impacting our oceans. I remember a number of years ago now, I had a chance with working with Dr. Irving Crick on a startup. And Dr. Irving Crick was 81 years old when I met him. He actually was one of Albert Einstein's students at Princeton University when he was a visiting professor. Then took a professorship, and he started the meteorology department at Caltech. And Dr. Crick was telling me what was going to happen. He did a long-range weather forecasting model and the kind of impact it was going to have on the planet. And one of the things he said is, Gary, he said, some of the changes are going to take place as the Gulf Stream is going to slow down. I said, well, how will you know when it's going to slow down? He said, when it snows in the UK, Sonny, and it doesn't snow much, but it has started to snow recently, right? And he said, those are some of the changes. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, that means that the food supply, the amount of fish are going to be available, or it's going to significantly impact the fish. And he said, with an increasing population. And I said, what else? And he said, there's going to be storms, hurricanes that'll be super hurricanes. They'll be 250 miles an hour that'll come in and just devastate agriculture. So these are some of the challenges. And coastal areas of India, with the rise in water over the next 50 years, could flood cities that have 4 million people. So we've got a lot of challenges, but we also have a chance to course correct with the opportunities. Right? The breadbaskets of the world will be Canada and Russia. As we go through this global warming in the next 100 years. So we've got to address accordingly. We've got to figure out how to do things like hydroponics, how to be able to be much more efficient, how to be able to use the Internet of Things on a farm to be able to maximize and optimize the crop yield coming out. I mean, to be able to course correct using artificial intelligence and sensors to be able to understand One is a time to put those chemicals in. One is a time to bring the self-driving tractors out, the tractors of the future out on a mass scale. The other thing is how to support those farmers that are those rural small farms and how to bring them in as part of the system. So the good news is it's going to have a dramatic impact on it. It's going to change where we traditionally have grown crops. And at the same time, we have to, dramatically increase our capacity in order to feed the population. As I said, by 2050, it'll take double the amount of food we have today. So imagine by the time we have 13 billion people. So there's a challenge, but the good news is, we have technology that can help. We've got to use it. We've got to figure out how to work better together. And we got to look at the pandemics has given us a chance to look inside ourselves and understand who we are and the kind of thing each and every one of us want and our vulnerabilities. We need to understand that compassion, as Kingsley said, is really important. We've got to help develop the food supply around the world and help those 800 million who are food insecure right now.
Absolutely. And talking about technology, thank you, Gary, for that. Talking about technology, I'd like our speakers to share some use cases. So what's the role of technology in playing in addressing food security? Maybe with some use cases. Amit.
Sure. Technology is playing a huge role. So to understand, food security and the role technology plays, you've got to really divide it in three aspects. The first aspect is the food production itself. And the second aspect being the supply chain that we spoke a bit about. And the third aspect being the distribution. Or rather, in some countries, the emerging landscape, the public distribution system, and the developing landscape, the distribution itself. So on the production side, absolutely, like Barry was saying, you're looking at hydroponics, you're looking at aquaponics, you're looking at alt proteins, alt dairy. There are a lot of vertical farming. There's a lot of stuff happening in each of those areas that are cultivating essential crops and looking at food which is far more sustainable, far more efficiently produced with low impact on the environment. That's on the developed world scale. Now, coming back to the emerging landscape, where Kingsley and me belong from, India and Africa, where you're looking at more sustainable forms of pesticides and insecticides that go into cultivating crops. You're looking at areas where farmers need to farm more. So rather than selling your land to real estate developers, you need to kind of look at, getting money from farmers, which means, eliminating intermediaries and, establishing practices of fair trade that really needs to kind of be. So on the food production side, that's how you kind of look at the emerging landscape as well as the Western developed landscape. In terms of, the supply chain itself, we've spoken a bit about the emerging landscape needs brick and mortar infrastructure to empower that from the farmer right down to the end consumer. On the Western landscape, I think it's all about, like Gary was saying, food traceability. That's a huge subject today. Can you really trace the food supply chain right back to the origin and really eliminate some of those causes that where your shipping is and what kind of efficiencies you're working on, how much wastages are you kind of looking at, and correcting some of those areas. On the distribution side of it, which is more to do with the consumer who's consuming the food, I think we've seen in the pandemic the emergence of e-commerce and how big the e-grocery segment has kind of gone, how it's pivoted. Today, you've got farm-to-table concepts more in tune with what's happening than they were ever. I mean, one would ideally have multiple middlemen in between before you can get your fresh produce grown on a farm to your table. But today, it's all about, hyper-local communities. The pandemic has made us depend on local supply chains rather than global supply chains, because when your ships are kind of not docking, how on earth are you going to get what you're used to buying? So you kind of go back to your local or regional community and feed off that, much like the farmers markets that you see in the West, and a version of that you see in the emerging landscape as well. So I think the pandemic has really pivoted, number one, the digital use in terms of distribution and the dependence on, folk to table, farm to table, whatever you call it, hyper-local communities living off each other. So those are the three categories that I see in the emerging market space and the much developed market space.
Wow, great points. You've just given us some categories and explained it, like supply chain, traceability, and distribution, and the role of technology on that. Really, thank you so much for sharing that, Amit. Thank you so much. Kingsley, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with Amit. He has said almost everything I wanted to say, but that is very good, right on point. The tracking process is very important. The tracking process, which is very easy to do, and then efficiency, waste management. Big companies have to play a better role. For example, you have companies that do conflicts, cereals. Take, for example, why don't they invest in a corn farm? They invest in a corn farm. They help the farmer to harvest the corn. It can be transported to where they're going to process it easily by them. Then they process it to either cereal or cornflakes or whatever. So this is just an example. So it is very easy to do if the bigger players in the game are willing to
have we lost Kingsley? Is he frozen?
I think he's frozen.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Kingsley.
Hello?
Kingsley,
Hello?
we can hear you, but you're frozen.
Hello?
No.
Sonny, can you hear me?
He's got that look too.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Kingsley, we can hear you, but we can't see you because you have
we
become
can see
static.
you, but you're frozen, Kingsley.
Oh, yes, sorry. What I meant, we can't see you moving.
Okay, it's the well, even in the developed countries, we still have internet problem, right? Even in the developed countries, it happens everywhere. So
It looks like you're trying to grab an apple from a tree.
right? Yeah.
It looks like you're going, I got the biggest apple. Oh no!
Okay, let me give you an example. What I was about apple. You see, in those days, the missionaries came to Africa, and there was no food.
Yeah.
Everybody was hungry. There was 20 hungry children, and they put down 10 apples for them, and they said, "All of you have to run. Whoever grabs the apple gets to eat. If you don't grab the apple, you go home hungry." What did the children do? They look at themselves, and they all grab their hands, and they all walk there together, and they share the apple. And they asked them, I said, whoever run their face said, what does it benefit me for my brother to die and I live? We have something to eat today. Somebody will also provide for us tomorrow, or we can survive it tomorrow. If we are going to die, we die together. Now, that is the spirit of sharing. The spirit of living together as one. That is how it used to be. Anyway, let me not deviate from the technology part of it. Let me go back to technology, right? That is just something that I always tell people, my children, people around me, that in your share, there's a share for somebody else. There's no need for you to just eat all by yourself, So we talk of efficiency. How does this get efficient? How do we use technology to make sure that the products are not damaged?
Yeah.
Right from the farm, right from the soil, how the soil manured, are the farmers educated for their soil to be manured properly? Do they have the proper tractors or machinery to work in the farms? Because when you go to developing countries, you have these old men and women working with their bare hands. You have their children working with them. It's not called child labor, it's called support. I did it with my parents. I did it with my grandmother. It is support. You are brought up to support the system that feed you. It was not child labor because you have to eat from it anyway. So that is a system that was there. So if we can support these old men and women in the rural areas. Give them machineries, give them the right manures, fertilizers, give them the right machinery, give them the right everything to produce them. You pay for it for them, you harvest it for them, and give them a little bit of the money.
Yeah.
So they can also survive. That is very good. Then you come to waste management. How do you manage the waste? How do you put the waste back into the system? You know, I am very happy with what a company called Soil is doing. It's co-founded by a lady. You know,
Okay.
It's called Soil as in SOIL.
Oh,
What she does is
soil.
she takes the waste, she takes the toilet waste and everything, and change it into fertilizers, into manures, to better their land, to feed them. These are projects that touches the heart. These are projects that do two, three things at the same time. It is clearing the city of waste. It is giving them clean environment, and at the same time solving the problem of fertilizing the soil, thereby giving them good production. Now you have the supply system. Okay, how do we do the tracking? How do we do the supply? The big companies, the big unicorns have to come here and be help. The coronavirus pandemic has taught us a very big lesson that our plans can change. We all planned for 2020, 2021. We are not living that plan today.
No.
We are not. Your plan can be diverted by any small pandemic. We only have one right now. Assuming we have two, three at the same time. How do we deal with it? We have only one. We cannot even control it. If we have two, three at the same time, what does humanity do? We have no idea. And all we are doing is trial and error. We need to come up with a system, with a technology that is managed by a central body for the whole world. Whether it's AI, whether it's robotics, but it is managed for the whole world, not just for Canada or for Japan or for Nigeria or for India. It has to be global impact that will change everybody, because what affects A affects B.
Yes.
The coronavirus started in China, it's in Nigeria, it's in South America, it's in Japan, it's everywhere in the world. That shows us that the world is now a very small community, a very, 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 very small community. So we need to protect others to protect ourselves.
Great points.
Sonny, just to get a point in before you go to Gary, like I forgot to mention an organization in India that is doing a lot of work in this area called Agrikash. Now that's founded by alumni from Chicago Booth from the United States who went back, especially a guy called Pankaj Pathak who started this in UP, and the whole point of a social enterprise like that is to basically go into semi-rural and rural communities and talk to the youth and the people and get them back into farming. And one of the ways they're trying to do that is to develop that skill that's kind of lost in the transit, because as people want to get more urbanized and move to cities, they want more glorious jobs and they want kind of this whole city life. So understanding of sustainable farming, so from honey farming to mushroom farming to pearl farming and some of those high value commodities that they can directly connect with the market rather than the intermediaries involved. So Agrikash is doing some fantastic work in farming skill capability development and supported by the government of India. It's a social enterprise at a micro level. And look, I mean, if somebody from a Chicago Booth quits their career in the US and kind of comes back to India and looks at that passionately, it's got a lot of credibility and a lot of opportunity to grow something like that in an agrarian system like India. So just wanted to get that point there. Sorry, Gary.
Is it Agrikash? Did you say Agrikash?
Agrikash. So Kash is for Kash, like the sky. So Agrikash.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Amit. That's okay. Gary and Kingsley, Akash is sky, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's sort of, I thought cash, but it's Akash. Thank you. Okay, great. Gary, yes, the question remains the same. I mean, technology in addressing food security.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said, we're on the cusp with the technologies that are out there with Farming 4.0, driverless tractors, IoT, Internet of Things, being able to understand and course correct on a farm to make them much more efficient than we are today. And of course, as I've said, quantum computers coming on board over the next couple of years going to dramatically impact how we can look at the data. So it's really, we're on the cusp of it. It's happening now. The question is, how do we get out to those rural farms that are out there and bring them in using cloud computing and all kinds of ways to bring them as part of the system to be able to help. The good news is we're moving in that direction. There's more of a democratization of opportunity than there was 2 years ago. So I'm excited about it. And part of it, as Kingsley said, is having the compassion to want to do it and to be able to make that impact. So each and every one of us has it incumbent upon ourselves, because we're all going to be impacted as a population increase to 13 billion by the end of this century. We're going to have critical food shortages if we don't start to lay the framework now.
Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you for adding that on. Being compassionate is absolutely the key. So yeah, we've just come to the end of the show, and I really liked the show. It's Monday, but still I learned a lot about food security and other factors that affects or impacts the food security as well. So great panel, great session, great Monday. I'm always excited to have Gary, Amit again on food specifically. I'm Kingsley family member, like we all are VCTV family member. Thank you so much. Let's take some closing remarks before we wrap up the show. Kingsley, over to you, please.
Yes, there's a very important sector that we forgot to mention, and that is security. Yes. Security is very important when it comes to food. Security in the sense that you have countries who are either at war or have some element of war in part of the country, and getting food to the refugees become difficult. Also, transporting food from one area to the other becomes very difficult. You have different organizations that are making that difficult for other people to make it work, like transporting food from the northern part to the southern part, from the southern part to the eastern part. If there's a blockade by any group, I'm not mentioning any name, but any group of people that are causing disruption in the food supply, we already have a problem. So how do we address these security situations? How do we allow food to get to people in war zones, refugees? Like take, for example, Syria, or take wherever, for example. How do you get this food to them safely? This is one angle I would like us to look at, maybe on a topic, how the food security is very, very important. Get the food to them in a secured way, which the World Health Organization, the UN should allow to get the food over to them. I was also happy the other day to know that the World Trade Organization is actually embracing technology and embracing digitalization, which is very good. So, but security is a major problem in getting the food to these people. This is a subject we can discuss for a whole day, and we try to put all in 1 hour. So if you have questions, you have contributions, give it to LaToken, or you can reach any of us, or you can reach me at kingsley@kingsleykobayashi.com. You can reach me at LinkedIn. You can reach me at Facebook, my official Facebook, or my official Instagram, Twitter. You can reach me anywhere, and feel free to reach out to anybody, and we'll be willing to put in some comments or suggestions that we know. And we also want to hear from you too. So if you have any suggestion, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kingsley. Thank you, Kingsley. And also, point noted, for another session, we're going to cover that topic as well as a subtopic under food security. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amit?
Yeah, sure. So, my closing points really kind of summarizes everything that, look, we are embarking on a very, very different time where technology is playing a more important role. But 2050, let's face it, more than 50% of the world population is going to be centric around countries like India, Africa, the States, and Indonesia. And some of them are going to be still in the emerging landscape, and some of them are going to be quite developed. And with that, one needs to talk about integrating technology and the role technology plays in addressing some of those huge gaps that we see today in food security, in food production and food distribution, and of course, like Kingsley says, getting food to the needy. And I think technology is going to play a very, very important role in doing that. So yes, I think we need food security more than ever. And to be very honest, it's going in the right direction. Let me kind of be honest about it. I'm seeing it go in the right direction. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. That's what we would like to hear. It's going in the right direction. Thank you, Amit, for sharing those as well. Gary, over to you with your closing remarks, please.
Yeah, sure. So this is a great time really the democratization of opportunity. We've understood over the last year the challenges that we can have and how we need to be able to help each other. And this has given us a good chance to reflect, as I said, to be introspective and to reach out. So it's a great time. We got to use the technologies that we have to be able to increase our efficiencies and to get the food out to the right people at the right time at the right place. You can reach me, Gary Fowler, on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm happy to talk to you, and stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe.
Perfect. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Kingsley, Amit, and Gary. Thanks for being a part of this panel today. We end the show now. I'll be back tomorrow on another episode of the Venture Capital TV. Until then, keep watching VCTV and keep supporting us, and stay healthy, happy wherever you are.